Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name is Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com, and Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners.
So I'll give you an example from a corporate standpoint. We do investigations in many different areas, but for one, we do product security investigations, anti-counterfeiting work, stolen cargo, diverted product, and in this space, the corporation relies on an investigative company like ours so that they don't have to employ that person. Let's say they don't want to bring on a full-time investigative resource of their own personnel, have a department manage that. And so they'll utilize us to contract out those investigations and kind of keep that arm's length. And the other reason is that they want to make sure that if they're investigating somebody or something, that later on, should they use that as evidence in a court hearing or some sort of trial, there wouldn't be any bias to that information. We're obtaining it as an independent third party with no vested interest in the outcome of that information. So that's one key reason why a lot of attorneys and corporations use private investigators.
Talking with the Experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. You can find it on all popular podcast streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today my guest is Michael Ski. I'm not going
Jaczewski.
Thank you very much. And Michael is going to talk about all things private investigation related. Now, Michael is affectionately known as Ski by most of his friends and colleagues, and he has spent over 19 years as a professional investigator, handling matters for individuals, entrepreneurs, attorneys, and numerous Fortune 500 companies. And with encouragement and spiritual support from family and friends, Mike launched Toltec Investigations and has since become the go-to person for countless clients who have come to rely on his efficiency and professionalism. He has built an extensive network of professional partners and during his career has investigated and managed case files in all 50 states and over 60 countries. Welcome, Ski. How are you today?
I'm great, Rose. Thank you so much for having me on.
So firstly, let me ask you, why would someone hire the services of a PI for their business?
Well, there's countless reasons, but what it comes down to is information. And that's what they're buying. They're buying from us either a faster, cheaper, better piece of information than they could get on their own. And so, because that's one very interesting part about private investigations is, especially here in the US, while there are some things we can have access to and obtain, it's just that it's more efficient. We're not allowed to access anything that the private citizen wouldn't be able to access themselves. It's just that we know how to do it. We know how to do it quickly and efficiently and effectively and put it together in a way that's usable and is information that can actually then be taken and decisions can be made with that information.
So how would they use that information, for instance?
So I'll give you an example from a corporate standpoint. We do investigations in many different areas, but for one, we do product security investigations, anti-counterfeiting work, stolen cargo, diverted product. And in this space, the corporation relies on an investigative company like ours so that they don't have to employ that person. Let's say they don't want to bring on a full-time investigative resource of their own personnel, have a department manage that. And so they'll utilize us to contract out those investigations and kind of keep that arm's length. And the other reason is that they they want to make sure that if they're investigating somebody or something, that later on, should they use that as evidence in a court hearing or some sort of trial, there wouldn't be any bias to that information. We're obtaining it as an independent third party with no vested interest in the outcome of that information. So that's one key reason why a lot of attorneys and corporations use private investigators.
Okay, so can't we just do all the research on, LinkedIn or Facebook or, just Google search them? Is that not as effective?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information out there and I can tell you it's funny because I've been an investigator before Google searching and before you could quickly and easily find everything you want online. What's interesting though is there's so much information out there. And so, for example, here in the States, if we run what we would consider a database analysis on an individual, it's going to feed us back somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 pages of data. And so it's not just a matter of finding it and obtaining it, it's sorting through it, understanding what's of value, what's not of value, and sort of connecting the dots on these bits and pieces of information. So a real private investigation nowadays consists of that technology element, but also the human element of this sort of art and science of pulling the information together in a usable way.
Yeah, so, what you do is not like what Magnum PI does. I know that's fiction, but it's not anything like that, is it? Is it totally different than what, the fictional characters do?
Yeah, what I love about Magnum PI is that he was a great source of inspiration for me. I loved Magnum when I was young. I remember racing home from school, and at 3 and 3:30, I would watch the reruns of Magnum PI, and I adored it. I loved it. Obviously the whole idea of riding around in a red Ferrari and on the islands of Hawaii and being fawned over by beautiful women in bikinis. But yeah, that's not quite what we're doing. It's interesting because in that show, he was a PI for an individual, a one client private investigator. And those still exist, those one client private investigators for very wealthy clients or very large corporations that utilize services. But what's interesting is across, and I, now in my career, I also have a PI training for private investigators looking to build and grow their business. And I list close to 80 or 90 different services that private investigators provide right now. And each agency and each individual is kind of unique. There are people who've built an entire business on one niche of investigations, one very specific line of service. And there's others who provide 4 or 5 services or 10 services and build a business around that and bring in different people who are experts in different areas. So, a lot of our time is spent explaining to clients that the things you see on NCIS and, on the TV and the movies is not quite reality, but, it still has enough of that mysterious cool factor that when you tell someone you're a private investigator, you're typically the first private investigator they've ever met.
Yeah. Well, you're my second, so there you go.
Perfect. Good. I'm glad that we're talking. I have a podcast myself, and a shameless plug. It's called Private Eyes Are Watching You. It's on Apple and YouTube channel and everywhere else. But one of my investigators who has taken some of my classes, his name's Dominic, and he is in Australia, and he appeared on my show, and he's just a great, wonderful resource. And so here I am now with you. And a few weeks ago, he was with me, and the time change here. So what time is it where you're at right now?
It's just nearly 1:30 in the afternoon.
Oh, okay. And 9:15 for me here in the East Coast.
Not too late. Not too late.
Right.
So,
right.
Being a PI, does it involve late nights, early mornings, undercover stuff? when you're doing something for a business, does that involve all of that sort of thing? Sitting outside people's houses and...
It sure can. It sure can. There was a time in my career where that's all I did. I would get up 3, 4 in the morning, go stake out a business or a residence, wait for some activity, document on video, photographs, putting together the reports, a true surveillance, true sitting in the van all day, waiting for some activity, waiting and hoping for some activity. so you've got something to do. But now I spend much more time on my business and growing the business and working with my operations team. And, I always say surveillance is a young man's game. Sitting in a car from 6 a.m. to 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. is it's a different type of work.
Oh yeah, I used to work for the Australian Customs Service in another lifetime, and we used to have to do surveillance on on ships and things, cargo ships and whatever, and it was like a really long day and night. It was tiring, and you get sick of being with the person, talking to them and trying to find some conversation if you're stuck there for 12 hours.
Right. And it's funny because, I always say surveillance is like fishing. You could go out there and catch the big one in the first 5-10 minutes, or you could sit there all day and come away with nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been on many of those, trust me. And some of them were like late night ones, and it was freezing cold, and you can't put the car on because, you're not supposed to be known that you're there. So.
Right. It's we were just interviewing for a new investigator this morning, and she said, I've really always been interested in doing the surveillance, following people around, documenting them. They don't know you're there. You're using covert videos and hidden cameras and things. I said, well, if you're really interested in that, this was about 8:30 this morning. I said, if you're really interested in surveillance, go back out to your car that you drove here for this interview. I'll come get you at 6 p.m. And She looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, that's what surveillance is.
Yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun at all. So anyone who wants to be a PI or thinks they can do surveillance, don't do it.
Yeah, when I was younger and had an operations management job at another PI firm, I used to tell the owners there, I said, instead of bringing these individuals in for an interview, when they get to the building, just tell them, sit right there. We'll come and get you. And we'll go get them at the end of the day. And they're like, Ski, I don't think we can do that. I think we'd get in a lot of trouble if we did that. I said, well, if they could last that, then they might work out. And they said, no, we're not going to do that.
No. So I guess, we've touched on how getting, a private investigator in for your business, it can be of benefit, especially if you have, like fraud things going on, especially fraud like in banks and in business. If someone's stealing from you, and you can get information much more quickly than the business owner could, because you know where to look. But in what other ways can it be of benefit to a business?
Well, a lot of the work we do revolves around due diligence and vendor vetting. So if a business owner is going to bring on a partner or have some new business venture, a deal that they're getting into, sometimes they just want to know, is this person I'm getting involved with a good person? What's their background? What are they about? What is their history? And, we just worked a case today where kind of a simple matter, but it's interesting because just a private citizen, and him and his wife are building a home, but the home's going to be about $4 or $5 million US. And they said, we feel pretty good about this home builder, but we just want to know more. We want to know more about him. And this is a huge investment for us. So spending, a few $1,000s with us to learn everything you can about someone who's going to build you a $4 or $5 million home is probably a wise investment, before you get, too deep into it. So, they want to know things about his credit and his finances and how the strength of the business and, his contractors and all these kind of things. So there's countless, benefits that, someone could achieve by hiring a private investigator to get more information for them. We certainly deal with a lot of business owners who are just going into a negotiation and they want to know everything. They want to know little things that they can bring up in the conversation. They want to know that this guy went to this particular university, or that he's from this part of the country, or that he loves to engage in this hobby or whatever it is, because they know that if they have that information, they can utilize it in conversation in part of the negotiation process. So it's really interesting. And I'm not so sure how it is, in other countries and other parts of the world, but, one of the things I've always tried to, bring to my agency and in my role as a private investigator is some real professionalism. For some reason over the years, you never hear a story like on the national news where someone speaks about someone hiring a private investigator in a positive way. It's always like a shocking story. It's like, so-and-so hired a private investigator to get this, information on this person. And it's always portrayed in a negative light. It's very rarely that you would watch a news broadcast and they say, they brought in a private investigator who was able to discover this, who was able to bring this positive conclusion to this situation. So we're constantly trying to make sure that the public understands what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And, there's in my line of work, in my business right now, there are way more positive scenarios where we're working cases that provide information for people to make a really good, sound decision on whatever it is that they're trying to do.
Well, I think people have this, because of the movies, basically, and TV programs, they have, usually PIs are, drunk and disorderly, and, they sleazy officers and all that. So, they get a bad rap that way. So, it's really good that you're saying that, you do some positive work, because, people's perceptions of a PI aren't that great.
Yeah, and Hollywood has done a good job of making that the case, for sure.
Yeah, they actually have, yeah. All right, so people that are perhaps wanting to hire a private investigator, what steps would they need to do to go about doing that, do you think?
Well, one of the biggest things that we make sure our clients understand and people understand is the qualifications, the requirements, the certifications, the licenses, the insurance, all of the things for becoming a private investigator, they vary wildly from place to place. They definitely vary a lot from country to country. But here in the US, with our 50 states and our 50 rules in different places, each state in the US has their own licensing, their own qualifications of what you have to do to be able to sell services as a private investigator. And so we're constantly making sure our clients are aware that, look, if you're looking for a private investigator, just like if you were looking for a pool contractor to build you a swimming pool, you better just do the little bit of work it takes to make sure that they're properly licensed, they're properly insured, they don't have disciplinary actions against their license and things like that. Because it's just too easy to, trust that investigator to, provide you all of this and not really understand their credentials. And so we're always letting people know to do your little bit of investigating before you hire.
Yeah.
And if the person you're considering hiring does not have quick access to credentials. I mean, if someone asked me to show them my state license and my individual license, I would have it right in my phone or my computer. I email or text it to them immediately. Here's the credentials. Here's everything. And so, it's very important because of the variance in qualifications. You really want to know who you're dealing with.
Yeah. All right. So Now, any tips for anyone perhaps wanting to hire a private investigator? Other than what you've just said, about, doing your own due diligence.
Yeah. So one thing we always, encourage people to understand is that the real objective behind their objective. So most people know, hey, I want to know this background information on this individual. Let's say a simple case where, a company is hiring new employees and they want to do a background check, let's say. You need to already understand your thresholds for what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And once we get this information, what are you really going to do with it? What is your actual end goal? And most of the time when we ask new clients that, they have no idea. They just want the information. And so it's important for us, if we're going to work with our clients and get the best information for them and present it in the best way in our reporting or whatever we're providing back to them, that we know what their goal is, so that we can really, be as efficient as possible and make sure that we're getting them exactly what they need.
So can you weed out whether your client is going to use it for nefarious purposes?
So there are contracts involved and terms and conditions and things people have to agree to. It's interesting you asked that question today, because I was just watching a little bit of a documentary on a famous case of the actress Rebecca Schaeffer, who years ago was killed by an obsessed fan. She was an actress in Hollywood and she was killed by an obsessed fan. And the fan actually got her home address by hiring a private investigator. And so this is a famous case, which a lot of statutes have been written in most states for private investigators, called Rebecca Schaeffer laws, because we are required to have our clients sign paperwork that says they're not going to do anything criminal. They're not going to do anything, there's all sorts of the typical, legal language and disclaimers about what people can do with the information we provide to them. But nevertheless, there are many times in any given year where we get contacted by individuals, and at the end, we're just not comfortable working with them. We don't believe what they're telling us, or something they're telling us just does not ring true. And you just get that sense as an investigator that this is someone who may actually take this information and wish to do harm with it.
Yeah, I am. That's always a bit of a concern that, for me, when a private investigator is going around and gathering information, that the person that they're doing it for, is not going to use it for the best purpose. So what happens, after the client signs all these agreements and everything, and they, saying they're not going to use it illegally, and then they turn around and they do it anyway? What does that happen to you? What happens as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, well, thankfully, personally, I've never had a situation that got to a serious level to where, I had to call into question or had to answer questions for why we provided certain information to a certain client. However, there are many, many cases like this. And if, anyone who hears about, and it's kind of hard not to hear about American politics, especially the last 6 to 8 months, but there were many cases in which private investigators have been called to task and their licenses have been revoked, et cetera, for providing information regarding political candidates in a way and that skirted boundaries of the law as far as how they gained the information to begin with, and then how the information was used by the people that they provided it to. So there's great risk. And, like you mentioned, I'm 19 years in the business. This August will be my 20th year as a private investigator. And there are many times where you just look at a case, you look at the information someone's requesting, you listen to your client and you say that this is just not something I'm going to do. It's not something we can get involved with. And I have had hard conversations with clients, even clients who have been active clients for 3, 4, 5 years. And then all of a sudden they come to me with something that's way just not ethical or maybe even borderline illegal. And I have to tell them it is not worth risking my license and my livelihood. And that is just something we can't do. And as your investigator and as a good client, I'm telling you, and I'm trying to hope you listen to me, do not go find someone else, because if you call enough investigators, someone will do this for you. And that doesn't mean you should do it. Yeah,
I agree. All right. So, do you have a website where people can perhaps get in touch with you? And I know you've alluded to your podcast. So, is there some way that people can get in touch with you that they need your services?
Sure. So my agency is called Toltec Investigations. It's spelled TOLTEC, and our website is toltec.net. Very easy to find. We're actually going through a really beautiful revamp of our website, which we're happy to launch in about 3 weeks. It should be ready, but our old site's sitting there. It's pretty as well, but not as pretty as the new one that's coming out. But for any of your listeners who really want to hear some great stories, the Private Eyes are Watching You podcast is just me sitting down with another private investigator telling fun stories on old cases. And some are interesting, some are dangerous, some are criminal, some are funny, but it's just two PIs sitting around telling old stories.
Perfect. Love it. I'll have to go and check it out. I like a good story. And I like a bit of crime and fiction, fictional crime and factual crime. And I'm a crime buff. So there you go. All right. Thank you, Ski, for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on and good luck with the business and the podcast. And I'll be sure to go and have a bit of a listen.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being on. Thank you.
Okay. Have a good night. Bye.
All right. You too.